A big hello and a very warm welcome to a special episode of Brand Equity, and I'm joined by somebody who is nothing short of a legend. I'm talking about Sir John Hegarty. He's in India and I have the pleasure to have conversation with him. So
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for joining us on ET Now and Brand Equity.
Great to be here.
So you've come back to India, what, 2.5 years later?
About 2 years, but yes, 2 years, yeah.
So what is your reading of the market?
Well, I knew you were going to ask that question. Well, I think the thing that you have to say about India is I think it is quite different from where we are in, say, the UK or America, where the kind of demise or the seeming demise of conventional or traditional media is occurring against digital. Whereas here, you get the sense that there's a much more of a balance, that traditional media is still very, very much more powerful.
I like the words you use, balance, or would you say behind the curve?
Well, I don't think it's behind the curve. I think we're going to find, I believe in the kind of Western world, if I can call it that, where there'll begin to be a rebalance between what is conventional media and what we can call digital media. I hate using those terms because everything is going to be digital. But
sure.
I think there is an essence of people beginning to realize you've got to trust the sources from which you gain your information. The whole issue of fake news is a big thing now in America, as it is in the UK, how news is being perverted, as opposed to coming from trusted sources that took years to build that trust. And trust isn't made instantly, it's something that builds over time. Whereas I sense here in India, there's much more of a balance between the traditional media and the growing importance of digital, which is fantastic, which I love. But, a balance would be a good thing to have.
Well, you're being very kind to India. But on another note, you founded BBH, co-founded BBH in 1982.
Indeed.
So it has been many decades now. How would you say?
Increasingly.
Do you think where you stand today as this legendary advertising figure, and you look back at the body of work that you've seen globally, do you think today we're in a much better place and state in terms of creativity, given that we have so much more tech, so many more tools, and I don't know about if you have more freedom or not. That's a different topic I want to get into. But do you think we are regressing or progressive?
Well, it's a very, very big question, and I think it's a very...
your candid answer.
And I'm going to give you a candid answer. I genuinely believe where I'm living in the UK, and I'm looking at America as well, I think the work has got worse. And that's just actually not my opinion. That is the opinion of the people we talk to. Our audience believe advertising has lessened in value. And as I constantly say, it's something I think that our industry should be taking very, very seriously. They don't seem to be. They seem to think that the answer to this is more tech, not more creativity, especially when everybody else tells us the future is going to be creative. And, I keep saying to people, I haven't read a business book which says the way to make your business more effective is to make the product worse. I don't know which business book people have read that have said that. I look at architecture and I go, architecture is really interesting today because what they're building is so much more interesting. I look at television and I go, wow, the things that are coming out of television are so much better today than they were 10, 15 years ago because they've employed more creativity. They're making it more interesting. I look at car design and I go, wow, what's happening with cars? Absolutely amazing. And then I look at our industry and the work's got worse. And I kind of think, how do you think you're going to succeed if you're making a worse product? And I think unless we answer that, and this reliance upon technology, which is fundamentally important, let's not get this wrong, creativity without technology would mean all we'd be able to do is sing each other a song or tell a story. Creativity has been technology has been fundamental to the development of creativity. But in the end, creativity has got to be the thing which leads, not technology.
So why do you think that has happened? Why do you think advertising has deteriorated?
Well, in fact, I I gave a talk on this, and it's called "Can You Name Gutenberg's Second Book?" And I think what happens when you get amazing developments in technology, you get this sort of creative deficit. You get a moment where everybody goes, "Oh my God, this is absolutely amazing. What are we going to do with it?" And this has happened before. You know, when Gutenberg invented movable type and the printing press, he printed the Bible. That was it. He didn't do a second book because he was a technologist. It wasn't his idea anyway. Somebody else had written the Bible. He didn't. And then he gave up on it. And then you look at the Lumiere brothers who invented the moving camera. They gave up on it. They didn't realize they'd invented a thing called Hollywood. So I think you get this sort of deficit where people just don't know quite what to do with it. You idolize the technologists who've invented it, and that's brilliant, and so we should. But in the end, somebody's got to say, well, what are we going to do with it? You know, we've now, yes, I'm fascinated by it, it's all very interesting, now what? And that's, I think, where creativity comes back. So I think we've had this deficit, and I think we now need to think about how we make this thing more interesting.
So you're saying now we're currently in a downturn, but we'll soon...
I think eventually we've got to. Because in the end, people will want to be entertained. You know, gravity will out. In the end, I mean, that's what's happened to television. If you look at the renaissance of television, actually not that it really went away. We were told by lots of kind of, you know, digital people that it had gone away. It hadn't actually, but, you know. But we're looking at a kind of complete renaissance of it because people are buying it in a different way. Because I can download, I can, you know, because technology allows me to binge watch or whatever it is. And all of a sudden, television has been transformed. Storytelling is now back in a sort of powerful way over sort of great, sort of long episodes, and it's really, really interesting.
I want to talk about storytelling and how we tell stories today. So back in the good old days of advertising, it was clear that you were actually selling a product.
Yeah.
It was clear, right? Which was the primary purpose of advertising, and I assume it is still today. But today, as you look at the mass body of work, you look at the Cannes wins, or you look at, you know, the local market, which is India, you look at the big ads that come on the tube, or actually on YouTube, which they call digital. It seems to be storytelling of a story which is very removed from the brand for some strange reason, and that seems to be the format, because people say, oh, advertising should not be intrusive, should not be in your face, but doesn't mean that it's so esoteric that you're kind of wondering, what is the connection? Do you have a view on that? Do you think that's the right way to go?
No, I think it's rubbish. I mean, I think it's another one of those pieces of nonsense. I think in the end, you know, people love advertising when it's great. They don't love advertising when it's not great. The trouble with advertising is about 95% of it is not great. So, you know, the idea that people don't like advertising because it's actually selling them something is rubbish. People quite like it if it's done in an engaging and interesting way. The great purpose of communication, advertising communication, is to take your product, I believe, this is my philosophy, it is central to the story, and build around it a really, really interesting story. That is the great skill of great advertising.
You would agree that the product needs to be the center
Absolutely,
of the story.
I've always believed that.
Right?
If you look at all the great work that BBH has done, basically they're product demonstrations, from Levi's to Audi, and we're still doing that today, to what we're doing here in India with Uber, to, you know, they're just great, they're great product stories around which you wrap a wonderful emotional message. But without that product there, it falls apart. We don't believe in kind of write something interesting and attach a product to it. And that, you know, that tradition of doing that has been around since I was working in advertising. People have believed that way of doing it. And I can tell you it doesn't really work.
Tell me, if you look at the advertising fraternity over the decades, do you think in terms of stature, they have actually moved up the ladder or moved down?
Well, again, I can't answer for India. I can answer for
globally.
For globally. Globally, I think we've moved down. I mean, there was a period of time in my career, when I was directly running the agency, when, you know, we were making advertising that was part of culture. We were making it important to people. We were telling stories that people wanted to hear, and Therefore, they connected with it, and we were part of that culture of that moment in time. And after all, doesn't a product want to be a part of culture? That's its function. If I can make my product more relevant to today, there's more chance of it being successful. Then your advertising has got to reflect that as well. And I think we've lost that. We've lost our sense of confidence. I don't think we're sort of explaining enough to people why it's great, what it can do for brands. And I think this is coming from clients. It's not just the advertising industry. You know, we're looking at a lot of large clients who are losing faith in what we call broadcast, however you want to define broadcast. And they believe it's all about one-to-one. I have a one-to-one conversation with somebody, get rid of all that waste. Who needs that waste? You know, and what they don't realize is part of advertising's task is to go out and convert. You know, what happened to that wonderful word? Conversion. You know, that's what, you know, religion understands it. Convert. That's how you make it succeed over the long period. Well, brands seem to have forgotten that.
Do you think their loss of stature in turn is now reflecting in their relationships with their clients?
Yeah, I think it is. I think definitely it is. I think, you know, so many big companies now are run by accountants. And
yeah,
the trouble
by procurement.
with, you know, and it's procurement, and it's, you know, the price of everything and the value of nothing. And I can understand somebody wanting value, but the way you get value is by making something even more powerful, even more creative, even more distinctive, even more memorable. That's the way you get value for money. And if you're not doing that, all you're doing is reducing the value of the product that you're putting out there. Well, what's the point in doing that?
But who's responsible for this, you know, falling off of that high moral ground?
Yeah, I think events, you know, I think, you know, as I say, this kind of, you know, in a way we have a piece of technology that's come along that we use the word digital for the sake of using it, but where, you know, clients were told you can now have a one-to-one conversation, and that's absolutely incredible, and isn't that valuable, and you can measure it, and all that sort of thing is very, very important. But we've forgotten that advertising is persuasion as well as promotion.
Sure.
And if you've got to have both, you can't just have one without the other. You've got to persuade and promote. We seem to have focused totally on promotion, not on persuasion.
And whose fault is that?
Well, it goes back to the agencies and the clients. And those who are kind of making the big decisions in client companies are the ones who are saying, I don't want to do all that wasteful advertising, as opposed to, I want to do this one-to-one, which is not getting them anywhere.
What's your view on the increasing infidelity with clients today? Clients do not believe in a monogamous relationship. They believe, you know, many is the way to go. And we've never seen infidelity so rampant between a client, you know, with many partners. Well, would you be in agreement with that, saying, you know, one agency would not meet all needs, and hence, you know, polygamy is the way to go?
Yeah, I think the thing today is that what you want to do is you want to try and make the system work for you. So a long-term relationship with a group of people who understand your brand is, I think, fundamentally important. But also you want to have the advantage of being able to bring in other people to stimulate thinking, to see that there are new opportunities. So try and make both things work for you. It's neither one nor the other. And I think we have to accept that in today's world, there are more choices out there. You can do more things. And I want to experience that, but I want to try and hold on to the long-term values of brand building with the people who understand that brand.
When you were coming to town and I got my interview set up, I, of course, had my set of questions, but I also reached out to, you know, big fans of yours who are the top creative officers of the country in India. And they all were very, very excited to pose a question to you. So the first question, you know, is from KV Sridhar, known as Pops, formerly Urbanet, now a startup.
Sir, I always wanted to ask you one question. There are three iconic British brands which we grew up with: Saatchi, Lowe and BBH. Why do you think that these brands have lost their sheen after being acquired by group companies?
Right. Here's an answer to that question. I don't actually think us being owned by someone has lost our sheen. I think our relationship with Publicis is one where they say, we desperately want you to be creative. We desperately want you to be more BBH than even you are at the moment. They've encouraged us to be autonomous within their own organization. If there's any fault that BBH isn't the brand that it used to be, that lies with BBH.
Sir John, I wanted to ask you one more question, because we belong to a very different era than what is today. How long you think this fad of director's cut of 5-minute, 6-minute viral videos will last?
Right. Well, how long, the idea of a viral video of 5-6 minutes, I come from a world where I think actually shorter is better than longer. And I think the genius of advertising has been the ability to take complicated messages, reduce them down to simple, powerful thoughts, is something we should extol, not devalue. And I think we always suffer this thing about, let's make it longer. Longer isn't necessarily good. I hope we rediscover the value of making it shorter but more powerful.
The next question really is from Rajiv Rao, who is the Chief Creative Officer of Ogilvy in India.
Hi John, if you ever contested against Donald Trump, what would your campaign line be?
If I ever contested against Donald Trump, God! Now, who'd want to contest against that man? Well, first of all, I've got a better haircut. That would be the first thing. But, trying to kind of get people to understand that you convince people with the truth. He says it's fake truth, but he keeps repeating this fake truth thing. You've got to find a way of getting people to understand that what you're trying to do is get them to examine the truth. In the end, he will be found out, because it's going to come crashing down around him. But I wouldn't go into politics anyway.
Okay. Next question is from Agnello Dias. He is the founder of Taproot.
Hi John, I just wanted to ask you a really simple question, maybe a stupid question. Have you ever had a completely finished campaign that's been produced and shot, and then for whatever reason it's been rejected or never went on air? Can you talk about which one it was and why it never got to see the light of day? And what did you feel about it, and how did you take it if it did happen?
Gosh, that isn't a simple question. That's quite a complicated one, actually. But I did actually. We did in the sort of my dying days at TBWA. We did a wonderful campaign for Schweppes, which was for a new soft drink they were launching called Solo, and we had reached a point of view that it was a very sort of adult soft drink, and we sort of did a campaign of the first soft drink for men. They'd launched something similar in Australia, but they'd done it with the usual thing of kind of men ripping open cans and drinking them, and they thought they could run that in the UK. When they researched, everybody just laughed and thought it was ridiculous. So we took it on and did a campaign that used Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, laughing at the idea of masculinity. And we shot it. Ursula Andress, who was the Bond girl, was in it, and it was a wonderful campaign. It was in the can, shot by Dick Lester, who did the Beatles films, and they pulled the product. But it's going to happen. So what? Have another idea. Do something else. Don't worry about it.
Brilliant. That was a great story. Not many knew that. Your next question is from Arun Iyer, and he is the Chief Creative Officer of Lowe.
We are constantly told in our industry that this is a young person's business, and it's always fascinated me. How have you managed to keep yourself this relevant and edgy? It would be lovely to know more from you.
We are very much seen as a youthful industry. I think that's a shame in some ways. You would expect me to say that. I'm now 72, so people look at me and go, well, you would say that, wouldn't you, John? But actually, I remember when I came into the industry and I was looking for advice and guidance and who should I look to. We looked up to people like Bill Bernbach, who was 25, 30 years older than us then. We looked up to people like George Lois, who was one of the great art directors out of New York. We looked up to people who were a lot older than us, and we learned from them. We didn't reject everything that had gone before us. And I think our industry today is in danger of losing the experience of people who've gone before. So that's what I would say about the failure of our industry to understand there's huge value in what went on before. Look at it. How you stay relevant? as I said to you, take off the earplugs, read stuff that other people don't read, stay connected to the world, stay fascinated with the world, and I think you will stay relevant.
The last question comes to you from Josy Paul from BBDO. He is the CCO of BBDO.
We're seeing the rise of case studies in advertising award shows. And there's always this question about it. Is the case study getting better than the idea? What is your view about case studies? And even if case studies must be there, because the good thing about case studies is that they allow people like us in India to explain our context and things that people may not understand about us. It allows us to spread that and give the context to a larger world. So we find it useful. But what's your view about case studies in advertising award shows?
My only concern about case studies is we're brilliant in advertising at post-rationalizing. The number of times I've been in meetings and we've presented work to a client and I've heard the planner post-rationalize why we got to where we got to is something that I've always been. I sometimes sit there and go, I was in that meeting, I don't remember that happening. I think the danger is we focus so much on post-rationalizing and not on what we're executing. Nobody ever sees that bit of the iceberg. The bit they see is the bit that sticks out of the water. Yes, of course, that bit underneath it is important. But we sort of use post-rationalizing as a way of justifying what we've done rather than setting up great work and saying, when somebody sits down and opens a newspaper or switches on a TV, they don't get the post-rationalization. They get just the execution. That's what you should think about.
Talk to us about social media and courage. Social media and courage, because it takes great courage to have a point of view on social media, because that point of view is going to be either challenged or trolled or be enjoyed and built upon. So, what's your view about ideas in a new world of social media? We're trying to grapple with that.
Well, I think social media doesn't really contain any ideas. I think what it contains is comment about ideas. And what social media needs is something to talk about. I think great brands will give them something to talk about by doing something interesting, by saying something interesting, by being daring, by being different. And then social media picks up on that and has a conversation around it. So I think to expect social media to have ideas is a sort of slight naivety. Social media will comment on ideas, and that's what I would focus a brand on doing. Say something interesting and social media will pick up on it.
Before I let you go, I have one last question, and it's actually not about advertising. It's just about the world. And since advertising professionals, get a lot of their inspiration from the happenings of the world, I thought I'd ask you, what do you think is currently happening in the world and with the world? Why do you think there is so much exclusiveness and less of inclusiveness? Where do you sense what's going wrong or right, as the case might be in your opinion, with the world?
We are seeing a polarizing world. We're seeing a world where there are the haves, the have-nots, there are those who are succeeding, those who are not succeeding. And that is a result of the speed of technology, the way it is changing things so much. So we've got to ride through that. We've got to work out how to include people, not exclude people. And you look at the rise of, say, Trump in America. I don't like talking about politics. It's not my business. I'm in advertising. But you can see how he's risen on the ride of dissatisfaction. You've seen in the UK with this vote on Brexit. Sure. That's really about, people dissatisfied. They're not necessarily dissatisfied with Europe. They're just dissatisfied, so I can register my vote there. Look what's happening in France. We're seeing this all around the Western world. And I think it is that sort of incredible disruption that we're getting from technology that's moving so fast, leaving people behind, leaving them frustrated. And I think governments are not particularly good at kind of answering these questions. They're just sort of, looking at it going, we don't know what to do. I mean, there's just today, actually, there's been a report in the UK press about fake news and how the digital companies are allowing these things to appear in their sites. And they've suddenly confronted that. Well, that's been going on for the past 4 or 5 years. Why did it take you so long?
They just fell out of love.